closed his eyes, prayed about it, and when he opened his eyes, he had a pained look on his face, and he said, "Close it down." And I couldn't believe the words because that wasn't how the deal was supposed to work. I was going to
Yeah.
sacrifice and do sacrificial things and trust God, and it was all going to be okay in the end. My parents were going to be taken care of. I didn't know what was going to happen to me, but I
Yeah.
wanted my parents taken care of. And now that you're telling me that's not going to happen the way I thought it would, didn't
Mhm.
seem like the right deal that I'd made with the Lord.
Welcome to an inspirational people interview on the Share Life podcast. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and this episode I'm speaking with Jeff Feldhahn. Jeff, say hello.
Hey, Jason. Hey, listeners.
Glad to have you joining us. Jeff is here to connect two worlds. In one, he's a Harvard educated tech CEO and attorney who masters complex systems. On the other, he's a best selling author and social researcher who has surveyed over 40,000 people to decode the messy systems of human relationships. Jeff is a master of building ways of life, both for business and personally, and for hearing God's direction in our lives, even when it takes a long time to see the fruit of what He's asked us to do. So, Jeff, you are both a people person and a technical person. How did that person come to be? Where did you come from? And tell us about you.
Wow, wow. Well, let's see if let me try a starting point of honestly, it's I had a great family upbringing in Michigan, small town. Loved all of it, every moment of it. But really, it feels like my life really started when I was 18 years old and came to know Christ. And it did just really transform how I came to view life and the world and the interactions with me in it.
Tell us about the context. So, if that was at 18, you said you had a great growing up, but
Yeah.
what was the atmosphere at home and how
It,
did you go from where you were to?
atmosphere at home was I did not grow up in a household.
Yeah,
Grew up in a household of terrifically wonderful parents. A three older brothers, and we loved each other. And we didn't have a whole lot. It was in the 1970s, but
yeah,
we had was enough.
yeah.
And engaged in all sorts of kids stuff growing up. And I never doubted my parents' love. Never doubted that they didn't prioritize me and my brothers,
Yeah.
and sacrificed for us.
Mhm.
And it was terrific childhood.
Yeah.
I look at oftentimes when I think of maybe some of the things that God has allowed me to do, and I think like anyone can do it.
Mhm.
It's out there. It's not rocket science. Maybe it isn't, but we
Yeah.
all don't start from the same kind of with the same soil, with the
Mhm.
same watering. And I realize that, as I've gotten older, that I just had tremendous advantages.
Yeah. What would be some of those advantages?
I remember being anxious about school and
Mm.
studies and doing well. I didn't have anxiousness. Are my parents going to stay together? Do my brothers hate me? Those kind of interpersonal things, and they put a foundation in me
Mhm.
of what I believe
Yeah.
is what we can all have. And what again, I don't say that we can all have that because we all start from different
Yeah.
points. But it's a lovely thing to have, even if some of the other things in this world that we desire or think we need, we don't get. If we
Mhm.
have those things, man, we're set.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that because I have a neighbor who goes to we're at Gwinnett Church, part of North Point Ministries, and they are fostering through the Fostering Together program. And it's interesting just how many things that when you have a fairly normal or even a positive upbringing in a family environment, how many of those dynamics you're describing we just take for granted.
Hmm.
And when you're in the fostering environment, you realize how much you take those for granted and how often those actually aren't the case.
For sure. For sure. So in my case, it set me up to try things. Maybe it was because somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew I could always move into the basement of my
Mm,
parents' home if things really went south.
yeah.
And I just had this conversation yesterday with someone when both of my parents have passed, and
Okay.
they passed, when I was in my 50s,
Oh,
mid
okay. Wow.
50s. And so I was a
About
grown.
within a short period of time of each other.
Yes, within a year
Mm,
of each other. So
wow.
I was a grown man,
Yeah.
um, with my own family, with my own obligations, with my own life. but somehow in the back of my mind was this solidness that if
Mm.
everything went south, my wife, my kids, we could move into my parents' basement.
Yeah, yeah.
Still, there was that sense
Like a
of
safety net
safe.
of sorts.
Absolutely. And when they
Mm.
weren't there, then it was really real that, gosh,
Mm.
it's kind of on me.
Did it feel like the rug was pulled out from under you when they both passed?
Well, they were it was long, kind of expected, but not expected. So,
Yeah,
in the actual moment, yeah, it felt like that, even though
yeah,
you knew it was coming.
yeah.
They were both 90 some years old. So look, they, a good, wonderful life, and they had made the journey to a journey of faith like I had, many years earlier.
Mm,
So all things that could be unsettling were settled.
yeah. So talk to me about the dynamic of there's the idea of trusting God. Like in that situation, you have this safety net in your parents.
Hmm.
But when that safety net is removed, when we face these type of situations where it's us,
Yep.
it's us and God. Like it's trusting Him. Like how do you differentiate the two? The dynamic of like we say we trust in God, but then when it really comes to those situations where we actually have to, talk to us about that.
Yeah, when it comes, I'm not sure I have a simple answer for that other than it's testing over time. It's experience. It
Mm,
is n- I didn't question my parents' love for me because I saw it modeled. I saw it
hmm.
done day
Yeah.
in and day out. And I think when it comes to trusting in our Father, um, it is that sense of I've seen him show himself faithful, oftentimes in micro kind of opportunities of
Yeah.
faithfulness, but then in also in
Mm,
the big ones.
yeah.
One of my favorite verses in the Psalms is from Psalm 112, and it talks about the righteous man, and
Okay.
it says, "For he will be remembered forever. He is not afraid of bad news. His heart is firm, trusting in the Lord. His heart is steady. He will not be afraid." And honestly, that's what I want to be said of me.
Mm,
But that doesn't just automatically appear.
yeah.
It's hard gains, and I look back to, seeing God's faithfulness. I mean, I can dive a little back into my story,
Yeah. Go ahead.
when
Tell
things
us.
changed,
Yeah.
and kind of how I got from there to here. And so I became a follower of Jesus when I was 18.
Did someone
Um,
invite you to church? Did you go in
I,
on your own or?
Believe it or not, it was a high school teacher.
Oh, okay. Coach? Just a teacher?
No, I was her student assistant.
Oh, okay.
So I worked in grading papers with her in her planning session,
Yeah.
and she shared the gospel with me. And through a series of events, it made sense, and
Yeah.
and I accepted Christ. And so that was in my senior year. I had everything was designed that I was going to go to college. I was a
Hmm.
fairly good student. Academics came relatively easy. I had to study, I had to work hard, but I got it. So I was
Yeah.
planning on going to college, enrolled at the University of Michigan, accepted, and in between, that time of acceptance there, I had become a Christian,
Hmm.
started sensing, gosh, what is God's plan for my life? Is it
Yeah.
go to college or what?
Hmm.
And as you do when you're 18 and thinking back in the day in 1980 when I graduated from high school, it was kind of in the era of the books, the late great Planet Earth, Hal
Hmm.
Lindsey. We're
Okay.
all we're speeding toward a conclusion of this work. And
Yeah.
so in my 18-year-old brain was this idea that, well, heck, if things are going to wrap up within the next 10 years, what the heck am I getting a college education for? So that was lodged somewhere in the
Oh,
back.
interesting. That's an
But
interesting parallel to my generation, which grew up in the Left Behind era.
exactly.
Right? It's just a
Yeah,
different form of the end of the world.
yeah. Right, right. So that was there hanging out in the back of my
Yeah.
brain. Um, Plus the idea that I did want to serve God. And then another event occurred, which was my older brothers, um, opened up a restaurant
Oh, wow.
in a city that was nearby where I, grew up, in Michigan. And my parents invested their life savings in that
Wow.
restaurant.
Yeah.
And so I agreed that I would work the summer, with them and get it off the ground, and we'll see what happens. Shortly after the restaurant opened, I started college and I felt unsettled leaving
Mm.
them, leaving my
Oh,
parents.
wow.
And, so, I prayed about it and I really felt that God was leading me to withdraw. So after 2.5 weeks in college, I withdrew
Wow.
and came home and worked in the restaurant, assuming it was going to be maybe a 3 or 4 month period, just to
Mhm.
make sure that it's on solid footing, provide free labor, all of that sort of stuff, and then start back in the winter term at college. Well,
Mm.
the restaurant didn't start as a success,
Mm.
and my free labor became necessary because we
Huh.
couldn't afford to pay.
Mm.
So others to do the work. So 7 years later,
Wow.
um, I'm still in there, and I'm still, I was growing in my faith, which was tremendous. It was a really challenging time. I never took a salary those entire 7 years.
Wow.
Um, would buy my clothes at the local Goodwill store, and my mom would um, kind of hem them up and fit them to me. So
Yeah.
so that was how I lived for 7 years, but God
And
was growing.
what years were those?
From
When
the
was that?
time I was 18 until I was 24.
Okay.
So from 1980 to 1987. And
Wow.
the problem was, and it was honestly, it wasn't all drudgery. I was working with my brothers. My parents had started
Yeah.
working in the restaurant too. So it was fun as a family. We loved one another. We
Yeah.
served together in this. Money comes in handy every now and again, and
Yeah.
we didn't have it. We ate for free, but
Yeah.
didn't have much in the way of financial benefits.
So what's your how do you attribute like a restaurant that's doing well should be able to pay its people. So what was the problem?
Oh, location, location, location.
So it's in a
So
bad
the
place.
location was Flint, Michigan. In Flint, Michigan in the 1980s, which was Flint was the birthplace of General Motors.
Oh, wow.
So factory town. In the 1980s, there was significant contraction
Mm.
among the auto
So
industry,
timing and location, it sounds like.
timing and
Yeah.
location. So all of that, but I felt God was in this, and it was, so we embarked on a journey for the last maybe 2 or 3 years of when we were in the restaurant to see if we could sell it. And my prayer was, Lord, um, this is what we need for my parents to be made whole. I didn't care if I didn't get anything out of it, but let them return their life savings to them because
Mm.
they're in their 60s,
Yeah.
and
They put
they
everything
needed it.
into this. Yeah.
So during that time, like I say, I was growing in my faith. It was a small little church that I was part of, and it was a kind of an inner city church in Flint, Michigan. So it was ethnically diverse. um, maybe about 50, 75 people in this little church.
Yeah.
And there was an individual who would come once a year and hold revivals. The church
Mhm.
it was a full gospel church,
Yeah.
non-denominational, but charismatic in its orientation and beliefs. And there was an individual who would come. He was in his late 70s and hold revivals. I
Yeah.
love that term. Once or twice a year. And this guy would never have described himself as such, but I would describe him, and others did, as having a strong prophetic gift.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
that isn't shocking to me to hear someone say, that person's a prophet.
Yeah. And
That
for
was my
someone that hasn't had that experience, how would you describe that person?
um a guy who hears from God, and it comes to pass, some
Yeah.
of the things that he says. And I don't know any other way of just saying you have to kind of experience it to believe it.
Yeah.
So this guy took a liking to me, or he enjoyed my company. Now he was physically deaf. He had lost
Mm.
his hearing a decade or two earlier. But he would say, "Brother Jeff, when I'm in town, I would love it if you could come and spend, whatever, an hour or two with me in one of the days that I'm here, and we'll just talk. And why don't it be that if you have questions that you want to ask of God, you write them down and I'll pray over them. And if God gives me anything, I'll share it with you." So it
Yeah.
was kind of like in the Bible, there's the story of Saul,
Uh-huh.
Well, he was Saul, not King Saul yet, but
Yeah, yeah.
his family had lost track of a herd of their donkeys.
Yeah.
And so he went out to look for them, couldn't find them, and the servant that was with him said, "There's a prophet over here in Ramah. Why don't we go ask him and see if he's got news for us?" And as they arrived at the prophet, and the prophet was Samuel, and he said, "Look, your donkeys have returned home safely. Your
Mm.
father's now more concerned about you.
Yeah.
So just so you know that. And so you also know." And then he told Saul a number of things about his life.
Mm.
Um, that's what this sort of felt like when I would go and sit and talk with him. So 1987, he comes up to our church to hold a revival, as he had in the past. And when he got to the church, he asked the assistant pastor if he could go over to the restaurant and talk with me. And I thought, and so they called me and said, "You got time today?" And I went, "Sure." So he came over to the restaurant. We went in the back stock room, sat down, and he said, first things out of his mouth were, "Your aunt, I'm seeing an image of her in my mind right now, and she's grieving terribly." Now, he didn't know I had an aunt. She'd never been to church. I've never talked about her.
Yeah.
And the weekend before, my aunt's husband, my uncle, had passed away from a heart attack.
Mm.
Just nobody knew about it. I mean, it was there. I hadn't shared it with anyone at church.
Yeah.
No one had told this man this. So I'm sitting there going, wow, he's plugged in. And at that point, he said, "Why don't you ask me any question?"
Yeah.
And so I wrote down on a piece of paper for him to read, um, what what should we do with this restaurant, because it was failing, and yet I was praying that God would find a buyer for it and restore my parents' life savings. And he closed his eyes, prayed about it, and when he opened his eyes, he had a pained look on his face, and he said, "Close it down." And I couldn't believe the words, because that wasn't how the deal was supposed to work. I was going
Yeah.
to sacrifice and do sacrificial things and trust God, and it was all going to be okay in the end. My parents were going to be taken care of. I didn't know what was going to happen to me, but I
Yeah.
wanted my parents taken care of. And now you're telling me that's not going to happen the way I thought it would. Didn't
Mm.
seem like the right deal that I'd made with the Lord.
Mm.
And so then I write the next question down, which is, well, what do I do? And if we close it? And then I wrote, "Go to college, question mark." And now I'm 25 years old. People from where I grew up don't start college at 25.
Mm.
I had felt that, my life from that point on was going to be managing a fast food restaurant or something like that. Not
Yeah.
what I set out or wanted to do as a kid. Not saying that that's not an honorable occupation and that people do it and they honor God in that. But for me, it felt like not what I was hoping for my life.
Yeah.
And so said that, kind of wrote that, and it was sarcastic almost. Like, I don't have any options now if we close this restaurant and God doesn't do something great. And he closed his eyes and he said, "Yes, yes to the college thing. And if you will do beyond your wildest dreams." So I later asked him, well, I'd had in the back of my mind, always from a kid, that I'd like to be a lawyer.
Mm.
And so I thought, well, why not just go for it? And I said, well, if I go to college, I'd want to go to law school. And if I went to law school, I'd like to go to Harvard. Can I? Question mark. And he closes his eyes and prays, and he goes, "You can." And from that moment on, I believed it, and it happened exactly that way. We closed the restaurant down. Um, my brothers went and found other jobs. My parents, to make a long story short, the family farm that they had been born, my mom had been born on, 7 years later was sold, and they did fine. They were restored.
Yeah.
Everything that was lost in that restaurant was restored. And I went on to college and then to law school at Harvard. And it was because God intervened in my life. Now, He intervened in an extraordinary way through an individual that I wish every time I have a question, I wish he was still alive and I could go and ask him. But what I've found over time is that God does, He speaks through individuals in our lives, but He also speaks into that part of our soul and spirit. And then it's the matter of trusting.
Hmm.
Okay, I guess I'm going to walk this out. And
Yeah.
that's been my journey since, whether it was through law, through getting married, whether it was um, doing all the different things that I've done in the 30 years since law school.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't clear in the moment all the time. It required steps of faith, a lot of uncertainty, but over time the trust was built into the goodness of God through that experience.
Yeah.
um so anyways,
Yeah. So
the
what would
story.
you say about the dynamic of asking God for something and expecting him to respond and intervene in a particular way, and him responding and intervene in a different way than you
Yeah,
expect?
it's a real trust me, it's a really hard one. And sometimes I have to realize, and I don't know if I'm moving the goalposts on this necessarily, but it's oftentimes only in retrospect that, when I ask for something in a particular way and it didn't happen, it wasn't even remotely close. But what did happen then, you know, cause something else to happen and something else. And the place where I'm currently at, or where I'm at when I'm looking back, is like, I'm grateful. I'm grateful I'm here. And I wouldn't necessarily be here in this point if what I'd asked for occurred. And
Mhm.
so, that is, again, I mean, I'm not just trying to give God an out and go, it all, the Bible does say that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And that means all things.
Yeah.
And so even those things that I didn't really want to occur or happen, it brought me to the place where I can look back and go, thanks be to God,
Yeah.
that I am here in this place. So
Yeah.
so and that's all just it's hard fought. It's
Yeah.
trust. I don't minimize the points where people, when they pray and ask God for something and it doesn't happen, and it hurts a lot, and they get um resentful of God. I understand that, and
Yeah.
certainly have been there at points and seasons of my life. But
Mhm.
I just say the grace of God kept me from staying there.
Yeah. So if someone's hearing this, let's say they're not a Christian or they're
Yeah.
agnostic, and they're like, "Okay, this is interesting. What would be a next step for me? Like, what would be a starting point for me to kind of take my own step towards exploring this for myself?"
Yeah. I I think there's an intellectual argument for God. We can go back to, a creator, the universe, and has it always existed? If that's the case, there's seems to be some evidence that that isn't the case. And if it did have a beginning, then I think we assume that it had a creator.
Mhm.
And nothing doesn't come from nothing.
Yeah.
So So if we can get to the intellectual, and there is plenty of good resources out there that if you will investigate, that
Mhm.
there is a lot of smart people, way smarter than you or me, Jason, who have come to the conclusion that it makes logical sense that there was a creator of all that we see and
Mhm.
experience. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that creator is mindful of each of us individually. And that's where, that's where individual, these things are important. These things are are critical to our well-being, our mental health in such a way. Explore and seek. And again, smart people smarter than me have come to the conclusion that the claims of Christianity and a personal God um, make the most sense. And so I'm just saying what I have encountered and heard and seen. And so I would say, don't turn off your brain. Investigate, stay with it. But then at some point, there is almost, I don't know, I want to call it a leap, but there is a point where you have to just kind of invite whoever that is, that creator of the universe, to engage with you in your life. And I believe that if you make that provide that opening, that being will, take you up on it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of for a person of not of faith. And then it's, doggone it, there are just things that I can't explain outside of a loving personal God doing things in my life that are inexplicable. And now I think we can kind of train ourselves. We've been doing a study, my wife and I, Shanti, on mental health issues. And are there things that people who have been particularly resilient, are there certain practices that they have in their lives that appear to strengthen their mental health and their sense of happiness and hope? And from the research that we've been doing and conducting for the last couple of years, it absolutely does look like it. And one that we were just talking about today is that people who have um, high hope, and we had three different groupings of individuals in our research, in our surveys. We had low hope people, average hope people, and high hope people.
Mhm.
The low hope and high hope people were all, it's a bell curve,
Yeah.
were 25% each.
Mm.
50% were average. We wanted to study, and these were people who identified themselves as kind of high hope. We had a mechanism of identifying them. And of those 25%, they did have characteristics and practices that were considerably different from the average hope and the low hope people. And I think all of us in life want to find peace and happiness and
Mhm.
hopefulness. We want to go through life for that way. And so one of the things that we were just talking about today was um, as we've described it and people described it for us that we were interviewing, is that the ability of connecting the dots, of seeing a purpose in my life, and of seeing a higher power, and in particularly a personal God that's aware of who I am and is orchestrating events, even in the minute, simple thing of one person, her story, schizo. She's has struggles with schizophrenia
Yeah.
and has medication for it. But she told this story of how one day it was a particularly awful day, and she was in her car and she's in this slow traffic, super frustrating, and can't get where she wants to get on time, and she's just so it's just adding to the hard day.
Yeah.
And as she stops at the supermarket, she encounters an old friend that she hadn't seen in years and years and years. And this old friend shared some stories and things with her that altered the trajectory of that day for her.
Yeah.
And she said, if I had not been stuck in traffic, I would have arrived at the supermarket 30 minutes earlier. I would never have seen that person. And so she was willing to look back, even in those moments of frustration, and connect dots of perhaps how God was intervening in her life, even though it was a hard day. Um, and so she says, when I now face some of these hard things that I have to face every day, I choose to wonder how God is using this. And so he's got a purpose and a plan. And for me, that has been kind of the cornerstone for me in my life. And I look back at these things and go, okay, I don't really care for where I'm at right now, but I'm going to
Yeah.
trust that there's part of this purpose.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that we can do, like whether it's telling the truth or choosing to do good things when it's not popular, and but where there may actually be a negative consequence for doing
Yeah.
those things, right?
Yeah.
And the idea of trusting God, the Sabbath is another one that comes to mind. It's
Mm,
trusting God, taking a day away of rest and release, and trusting that God's going to fill that day
yep.
for us. He's going to work that day for us, so to speak. And when we go the opposite direction, we're working every day all the time, and we're trying to control everything. We're essentially not trusting God in that behavior, which also doesn't let us see, his ability to deliver on that trust, right?
That's correct. That's
Yeah.
absolutely right. It is one of these that we all want a story,
Hmm.
of our lives
Yeah.
to be kind of admirable or inspiring. And the truth of the matter is, without the struggle, we don't
Hmm.
have the story.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd like things to be easy,
Yeah.
but it's the struggle. It's Tom Hanks in A League of Their Own.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be hard. It's the
Yeah.
hard that makes it great.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So you're a Harvard graduate, a lawyer. Did you meet any women along the way here?
yeah, I've alluded to Shanti, and we were in graduate school together. She wasn't at the law school at Harvard, but she was
Okay.
getting her master's, and we encountered one another in a Christian a cappella singing group.
Okay.
So, the whole Ivy League thing, that whole a cappella stuff is all throughout. And so at Harvard Law School, at least the years I was there, we had a cappella singing group. Now, I'm not particularly great at singing.
Yeah.
Shanti, my wife, is.
Yeah.
So she joined, and everyone else in the group was happy that she joined.
Yeah. So
And
you
we got
needed someone to talk to in the group. Is that what happened?
That's pretty much it. And we spent a year kind of just hanging out and becoming friends.
Yeah.
So,
So, and then do you stay in that area or do you guys
oh,
leave?
after law school, I moved to New York. She still had another year to go at Harvard. I moved to New York, went big law firm, worked 100 hours a week
Wow.
at least, and we ended up getting married when she graduated, and spent the next 4 years really being ships that passed in the night. We had $135,000 of student loan between
Yeah.
us. Now that doesn't a lot for people now, but in 1993, it was a house,
Yeah. It'd be like 300
so
grand today, maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
probably. So
Yeah.
so, I was focused on let's get this paid down, and I was afraid that I'd lose my job if I didn't work all those hours. So I worked, and Shanti and I would see each other, honestly, at church on Sunday.
Wow.
I mean, I would be gone before she got up, and I would be coming home after she went to
Yeah.
bed. And it was
Now,
just, and she worked on Wall Street, so she had a busy life too. But, it wasn't what we wanted for the rest of our lives. And
didn't that dynamic kind of shift you guys to writing your her first
what
book?
well, what ended up happening is both of us she was a financial analyst, and so
Mhm.
both of us kind of had developed, through those years, some good analytic skill
Yeah.
set. So after we decided that we were going to leave New York, we moved to Atlanta, where we currently are, where we're presently.
What year was that?
That was in 1998.
Okay.
So 1998, we wind up in Atlanta, and she proceeds to have this strange experience, and she didn't have a job when we got down here. Um, she had this strange experience that she felt God was asking her to write a book. I know a lot of people have had that, but this was really she's a pretty sensible person, and decided that okay, I'll do this. But I have no idea how to get something published. You're going to have to do that, Lord. So that was on a Monday, and this was going to be kind of a research based book.
Yeah.
And on Wednesday, she had a job interview at a financial services firm. And during that interview, it all went well. And the HR person said, so if we make, and it was a Christian founded financial services firm
Okay.
here in Atlanta. It's national, but home office was here in Atlanta. And the HR person said, so if I'm hearing good things, feedback on the interviews. If we were to make you an offer, um, when could you start? And so Shanti's thinking, well, just 2 days ago, she's thinking this, not saying it. 2 days ago, I felt that God was asking me to write a book. And if he really had asked me that, I can't take on a job right now. I have to write the book.
Mhm.
So she answered the question by saying, well, it's hard to say when I'd be able to start because I'm in the middle of a project right now, hoping that the HR person, thinks that it's a consulting project.
Oh,
To
okay.
which she doesn't. She asks, well, what's the project? And Shanti goes, I felt kind of even stupid saying the words that I'm writing a book. And the woman says, oh, and Shanti's hoping that that's the end of the story. And the woman says, oh, what's the book about? And Shanti says, well, and she gives her the synopsis of it, that she's formulated in 2 days. And the woman says, well, do you have anyone advising you on the publishing process? And Shanti says, no, but I've been praying about that. And she says, well, one of our senior executives used to be in publishing, in Christian publishing. And wait, I hear his voice outside my door. Grabs this guy, brings him in, introduces him to Shanti. He asks what the book is about, because, he was polite. And she tells him, and he starts to laugh. And he says, and she's thinking, oh my gosh, this is awful. This is not what I
They're laughing at my idea.
exactly. And he says, you're not going to believe this, but 4 days ago, I was sitting at a breakfast with one of the largest Christian publishers, and they told me they wanted to publish a book on this exact topic. And if I were to run across someone doing that, would I let them know? 2 weeks later, she has a book contract, writes the book, it becomes a bestseller, and then that just kind of
So
led
tell
into
people
the
what the
other.
name of the book is if they're interested.
Oh, it's not in print anymore.
Oh, it's not. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
no, it was very time specific. It was
Yeah.
on, believe it or not, the Y2K issue.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember? You were just a baby, but
I mean, I
Y2,
remember all the
yeah,
end of the world
all the
stuff.
hype,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, and it was unfortunately some of the hype was as believers. My goodness, we have to, you know, head for the hills, buy property up in the mountains, and all that. And Shanti had this feeling that just doesn't look like Jesus. If
Mhm.
things are challenging in our world, aren't we as believers to be salt and light and not
Run away.
pull ourselves away? So that's what the book was on. And she was researching. She
Mm,
wasn't making a prediction one way or another. She was using the research of, well, there's a lot of companies that are trying to
mm.
remediate this, so we should pay attention to it, but we should pay attention in the way of if something bad happens, how can the church be a blessing?
Yeah. Now, does that exist in another form now? If the church, if there's a
Yeah,
crisis, here's in.
it's a great question. So the very thing that I was talking about with mental health.
Yeah. So
So there's a
that's
mental health crisis. So that's
Mm,
what we've been researching. She just released a book 4 weeks ago on essentially it surveyed 2,000 pastors
yeah.
and pulled together best practices and
Mm,
what the church could do to step into the gap here, because
yeah.
there's a mental health crisis as of right now. There are um and there's a need for 109,000 more counselors, therapists than currently exist in the
Mm,
United States. We're not going to graduate 109,000 counselors and therapists anytime soon. There is a huge need for people to receive some sort of care in this area.
mhm,
And shouldn't the church be able to step in, and not necessarily to deal with the truly um, difficult mental health issues, but for probably 80% of the people, if you talk to therapists, a lot of the people in their practice that they spend time with don't really need to be there.
mm,
They need a friend. They need
yeah.
someone who will love them and listen to them. And instead, because the therapists are crowded with lots of people who could otherwise be served by what the church does best,
Mhm,
which is love. And
yeah.
so that is how that's again, it's Shanti, her idea is that, well, the church should be the answer to these things that we truly believe is the answer.
Yeah. So do you feel like this book is kind of coming full circle from that first one?
Yeah, I honestly, I hadn't thought of it until you just mentioned it,
Yeah.
Jason. But it feels that way.
Yeah.
It feels that way. All of the other books that we have written and researched were on kind of individual levels. So it was me as a man. How do I understand women? She is a woman. How does she understand men? And those kind of research. What are the things that the happiest couples do different than, most
Yeah.
married people? So those types of research projects were always personal and individual focused.
Mm,
This one is more kind of macro,
yeah.
at a the 30,000 foot view. And the beauty of this, of what the church can do in this, the church can do things that licensed therapists and counselors can't do. Because
Mhm.
you know what? Yeah, you might be in counseling, but you're not allowed, or the therapist isn't allowed to come over and have dinner with you on Thursday night
Oh, okay.
and be your friend. They have ethical boundaries,
Mhm.
They have a
Yeah.
client, you know,
They only feel
relationship with you.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but people in your church, you can go and have dinner, invite people over all the time. And for most people, just being listened to and heard and seen comes back to what we talked about earlier, is that we all want to be known.
Mhm.
I want to know that God's aware of me.
Yeah.
And what the prophetic man in my life did for me was he told me that God was aware, saw me in that
Mhm.
restaurant and saw something, you know, that trust him, Jeff. He's with you.
Yeah.
And that unlocked tremendous opportunities when you know that, he's with you. I was, and I'm sorry, I'm rambling perhaps, but I watched a short little clip of Tim Keller. And when we lived in New York, we went to his
Oh,
church,
cool. Yeah.
early days of Redeemer Presbyterian.
Were you
And
Presbyterian at the time, or did you just want to
no,
go to his church?
nope,
Yeah.
just wanted to go to his church.
Yeah.
I was always not kind of non-denominational after, being,
Yeah.
coming to faith. But we went to Tim Keller's church, and just I love the man, and he was like an amazing individual. So I don't know, a month ago I was watching something, maybe on social media or whatever, and there was a little clip of him, and it was probably filmed in the last year or so of his life because he looked somewhat drawn. He said in this little clip, he said, you know, if the claims of the resurrection are true, if Jesus Christ came back to life and walked out of that tomb, it's going to be okay. I don't know what you're going through, but if that claim of the resurrection is true, it's going to be okay. And honestly, Jason, for me, that just boils it all down. And
Mhm.
yeah, I might not like where I am right now. I might feel anxious. Might feel stressed,
Mm.
but it's going to be okay.
Yeah, I agree, and that's the kind of that foundational piece that carries us through the ups and the downs that are inevitable in this life.
Yeah, and we need it. And that is to the person who is, you know, it not just doesn't have that faith
Yeah.
perspective.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
it is harder. I mean, I'm just telling you, and our research showed as far as the hopefulness, the demographic differences, the between the high hope and the low hope people, um, of the high hope, I think it was somewhere in the 80% of those had a relationship with a being, a creator God that they viewed as being personal.
Yeah.
And not a significant portion of the low hope people had that
Hmm.
same belief.
Yeah, and that's it's I think even as Christians who say we believe that Jesus resurrected, you kind of look around and you're like, but do we really believe that? And I think that level of belief is maybe based on just how dark we've gone, how deep we've gone into the
Yeah,
abyss, you know?
yeah, right. But I mean, honestly, there are, and again, this is the new book that's being written right now on it's called The Habits of Hope. Those
Yeah.
things that people
Mm,
who have shown themselves resilient through trauma and difficulty, what are their practices?
yeah.
And those are all just, these are things that we begin to connect dots. We begin to remind ourselves of what we saw in the past. So
Mhm,
therefore, I'm going to trust that going forward in the future,
mhm.
I can expect a good outcome. Again, it may not be the outcome that I'm exactly hoping for,
Yeah.
but because
S
God is good, I believe it'll be a good outcome.
Yeah. So she writes her first book in, I guess starts the book in '98. She has to get it done before the turn of the
It
millennia.
is a very a very short shelf.
5 years later, after the millennium, you end up at First Baptist Atlanta, which is where we first meet.
Oh my goodness.
You and your wife are sharing your books. So, how did you get roped into writing a book?
Yeah, that's just I always I love the research part of it. But so she wrote a book in 2004 called "For Women Only: What You Need to Know About the Inner Lives of Men," and it
Yeah,
exploded. It became a bestseller, and it was
yeah,
helping women understand what's going on inside of men. Because, as Shanti would say, I thought I understood after 10 years of marriage, but I really, really didn't. There were things that I I thought Jeff was believed or thought this way, and I was just off. And what we found is most women fall into that same category,
yeah,
and it is what it is. So that book became a bestseller, and the publisher ends up going, you know, um, this one is ripe for a sequel. So we need to help men understand what's going on inside of women.
yeah,
And Jeff, it needs to be in your voice. You need to write it, with Shanti. And
yeah,
so I was resistant, didn't want to do it, and so, but that's how it started. And then from there, it moved to, after the book came out, and I thought I was one and done. And instead, it turned out that people wanted to hear us in person
yeah.
together,
So
and so
so
that
First Baptist calls you up and says, "Hey Jeff, we want you to come talk to the
you,
married
you,
group."
yep, yep, and so that was it. And so
Yeah.
that was honestly the second time I'd spoken in public with Shanti.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and now we probably do, together somewhere between 10 and 20 conferences a year that people call us and invite us to speak at.
Yeah.
Chauncey does a lot of women's conferences on her, without me, but
Hmm.
look, I would have never planned it, never
Yeah.
had any desire for it, but it seems to be what did the Lord say? What did God say to Moses? What do you have in your hand?
Yeah.
And so what do I got in my hand? Well, I guess I got a skill set of being able to ask questions and analyze things. Okay, that's what he's used.
Yeah. So I'm a student of yours at this event, and then about 10 years later, we end up in a leadership program together called Life Work
Yep.
Leadership.
Yeah.
And then just this year, we were both hiking this mountain called Yona Mountain. Unbeknownst to each other, you come down, I come up, and here we are intersecting once again.
Exactly, and I'd followed you, on
Yeah,
we'd corresponded every now and again, but as far as face to
yeah,
face interaction, it had been a long time.
yeah,
And,
years.
it was remarkable. So then it's kinda like, "Huh, okay, well, is there some dots to connect, Lord? What do
Yeah,
you want? This seems unusual, so let's just
yeah,
investigate." And so
w-
that's where we've been since then.
yeah. The gravitational pull of the orbiting.
Yeah.
So when you kind of look back at all this, like what is it telling you? What have you learned about living better, working smarter? Like how does this experience, this story you've been on, how's it shaped how you've kind of embraced and lived your life today?
Yeah, look, I am a uber planner. I wanna
Mm,
control all that I can control, particularly for of me. And what I've learned, I guess, through it is sometimes you can't aim it. Sometimes you the last known kind of instruction you have from God, you kinda keep on that path
yeah,
until something changes or intersects. And so I liken it to so you brought up hiking. There are times when I've hiked, sections of the Appalachian Trail, and on these trails, for people who don't hike, um, there's blazes that are painted on trees every a certain distance apart that helps you as a hiker realize that I'm still on the right path.
yeah,
And so these signs kind of on the trees kind of help you. Every once in a while, I'll be, I have my head down when I
yeah,
pass the blaze, and so I don't see it.
hmm,
And then maybe it's faded off of the next tree or whatever, and I go a quarter of a mile, and I'm going, Am I still on the right path?"
yeah,
And so for me, it is I have to be regularly checking in with
mm,
God. And I don't make dramatic changes in my life. I'm not that kind of guy.
yeah,
So what ends up happening is I try to keep checking in. If I don't hear something that says, you know, take a 90-degree turn here and do something different, I stick with the path that I'm on until I really feel that God is intersecting it
yeah.
in a meaningful way with a different sort of direction. Um, I don't know where that goes other than, look, you got to be checking in. You
Yeah,
got to be asking for guidance, and I just even in the silence, I'm
hmm,
assuming there's guidance.
yeah. Now you have done a lot of research, on these book projects. There's a lot of research that you all do, and costs a lot of money, takes a lot of time. But stories are what people connect to. So how do you connect the dynamic between stories and data?
Yeah, so this is the part of thanks for asking that Shanti is a little annoyed with, particularly in our conferences, because Shanti is her brain sorry
No, you're good.
works in these statistical models, and she just has a gift for it. But that can also cause people to, oof, that's a little beyond me. My brain works in stories.
Mm,
I learn from stories. I learn from the stories of the people that we interview before we conduct the surveys and the research that all inform that. And so I get to, at the conferences, I get to tell stories.
mm.
which tend to be those things that people remember. You might remember one statistic. You're not going to remember 10,
Yeah.
but you could remember 3 or 4 stories that you've
Hmm.
heard in an hour and a half or so. So, to me, it's the stories, because numbers are numbers. But until I have something that kind of lodges it into my brain,
Yeah.
it's just numbers.
Yeah. I kind of think of epoxy. Epoxy has the two components, the resin, and then
Right.
you mix them together. And so I think of data and story as the two
Oh,
pieces,
that's
and you fuse them.
great. Totally stealing that.
Yeah, yeah.
Totally stealing that, Jason.
So it works though, and that's how. I mean, I used to. I've taken a Dale Carnegie the course, how to win friends and influence
Yep.
people, and
Yep.
that's one of the things they teach you memorization techniques, and a lot
Mm,
of them are based on these visuals and stories because you can remember them. But if it's just like you said, random facts, they'll just fade away like in seconds. So
yeah, that's it.
yeah,
Wow, that's great. I love the epoxy
yeah.
illustration. Yeah, I'm
So
grateful for it.
how does systems play a role in all this? You're a technology guy.
Yeah, I guess. Look, I think there are systems that we can build in our own personal lives. It's, for the most part, um, when you're talking technology, I, I think kind of user experience type stuff, when we building software, building, um, we have to see how the person is going to engage with this,
Yeah,
and anticipate, what they need, their next steps, all of that sort of stuff. And you walk through it and you create the systems for that. In our personal lives, um, I do think that, um, I think of them more as kind of our rhythms, but
hmm,
they're systems. So
yeah.
for
Do you
Shanti,
think there's a difference between a habit and a system, or are they pretty much intertwined?
there might be a difference technically. You
Yeah,
know, for me, I kind of lump them
into the
together.
same bundle. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's like, whatever I want to end point, it isn't just based. Getting there isn't just based on my wants. I
yeah,
have to put into place the various things that help me get to that. And so, for
yeah.
example, as silly as, you know, physical fitness, and
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
maybe shared this with you the last time we were together. I had this absolutely insane thought, and Shanti affirms me in this, that it really is insane. But the idea was that I wanted to do in 2025, and again, this is insane. I wanted to do 100,000 push-ups. So how do you get to do 100,000 push-ups? Well, you have to have a certain number that you do every day, in
Yeah.
order to make it there. And so for me, it was, the number, so that I had enough cushion, that in days
300?
that yeah, 300 push-ups.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that if I wanted to get to 100,000, I needed to commit to 300. Now, I didn't do 300 push-ups at one time, but
Yeah, yeah.
what I did was I linked doing push-ups to other things that I automatically always did in my day. And this is nothing from us. This is from, James Clear's Atomic Habits, or, I
Power of
think
Habit, Charles Duhigg.
Duhigg, exactly, and BJ Fogg. He does. I think it was called Tiny Habit. So I read
Okay, yeah.
all of those,
Yeah,
and and
yeah.
and and, and, and what I came to was, okay, I need to anchor this new behavior in something I'm automatically already doing.
Yeah.
So it reminded me to do it, because
Yeah.
I'm not wired to want to do push-ups. I hate push-ups, but for some reason I had this goal and I wanted to accomplish it.
Yeah.
So I, every time I, get up in the morning, I spend my time, the quiet time, reading, the Bible.
Yeah.
And I'll read for 5 minutes, and then I go and do 50 push-ups. Come back
Yeah.
to my Bible, read for another period of time, do another 50 or so push-ups. Put the water on for my coffee. When
Yeah.
the water, when it boils, in the kettle, I
Yeah.
go and do another 50. And so it's this rhythm of it's a system, it's a
Mhm.
habit, but it as of right now, it's now become just kind of automatic. And I think that
Mm.
was with a lot of things. If I want a better relationship with my wife, I need to talk to her. I need to
Mhm.
spend time with her. And so we need to set aside time that we're
Mm.
just going to be together or
Yeah.
whatever it is in our life. We can't just want something and expect it to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because I think when people, like, think of a big goal like that, it's overwhelming, and I think
Mhm.
the idea of breaking it into the smallest piece possible, a daily thing, is just transformative in terms of actually making progress.
Yep. It is for me. And when you're doing software, you got to have all in those small little pieces
Yeah.
that this piece builds on this piece and this piece builds on this. You just need to do it that way. So and it can apply to all sorts of our personal relationships,
Uh-huh.
our individual goals.
Yeah.
But again, I have plenty of other goals that I haven't yet been able to crack the code on, as far as the habit for it. I mean, seriously, I
Yeah.
have some bad habits that I wish I could, even though I've read all those habit books, the bad habits sometimes still persist.
Yeah. Yeah. So what other words of wisdom or insights would you like to share with us that you haven't yet had a chance to?
I don't feel like I ever have really any original thoughts. I pull them from others. I would love to share
Yeah, yeah.
one, and it's when I worked in New York and going to Tim Keller's church. I was not happy. I was not excited with going to the office every day and struggling. So one of the things that in our early days of our marriage, Shanti and I made her listen to me as I read to her the Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
And so the Lord of the Rings, and that's how we spent our first year of marriage when we were in the same room together.
Yeah.
And there was a section in the Lord of the Rings that just stuck out to me. And so she knew how meaningful it was to me. So she typed it out, and I stuck it on the little bulletin board beside my computer monitor and would read it every day.
Mm.
People do this with scripture, but
Yeah.
since I love the Lord of the Rings, and I'll tell you what that passage was, but back to tying it up with Tim Keller, our last Sunday in New York before we moved to Atlanta, the last sermon that I heard him give in person, and he was talking about the Lord of the Rings. He's a big Lord of the Rings fan.
Yeah.
And he said, and here's my favorite passage. And it was the same passage
Oh,
that
wow.
I've been looking at by my computer monitor for the past 4 years. Anyone who doesn't know Lord of the Rings, I'm sorry if you don't, because
We
it's
don't
it's
forgive you.
it's magnificent, and it should be reread every year or two. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's another bit of evangelism that I'll share. But this is the scene where Frodo and Sam are trudging through Mordor.
Mhm.
So they are trying to make their way, and they're trying to go to destroy the ring, and everything is conspiring against them. And in this one passage, it says, "At last Frodo could go no further. They had climbed up a narrow, shelving ravine, but they still had a long way to go before they could even come in sight of the last craggy ridge. I must rest now, Sam, and sleep if I can," said Frodo. He looked about, but there seemed nowhere, even for an animal to crawl in this dismal country. At length, tired out, they slunk under a curtain of brambles that hung down like a mat over a low rock face. There they sat and made such a meal as they could, keeping back the precious lambas for the evil days ahead. That was a food that the elves had given them. They ate half of what remained in Sam's bag of Faramir's provision, some dried fruit and a small slip of cured meat, and they sipped some water. They had drunk again from the pools in the valley, but they were thirsty again. There was a bitter tang in the air of Mordor that dried the mouth. When Sam thought of water, even his hopeful spirit quailed. Beyond the Morgai, this portion of Mordor, there was the dreadful plain of Gorgoroth to cross. "Now you go to sleep first, Mr. Frodo," he said. "It's getting dark. I reckon this day is nearly over." Frodo sighed and was asleep almost before the words were spoken. Sam struggled with his own weariness, and he took Frodo's hand. and there he sat silent till deep night fell. Then at last, to keep himself awake, he crawled from the hiding place and looked out. The land seemed full of creaking and cracking and sly noises, but there was no sound of voice or of foot. Far above the Efelduith, that's a mountain range, far above the Efelduith in the west, the night sky was still dim and pale. There, peeking among the cloud rack, above a dark tor high up in the mountains, Sam saw a white star twinkle for a while. The beauty of it smote his heart as he looked up out of the forsaken land, and hope returned to him. For like a shaft clear and cold, the thought pierced him that in the end the shadow was only a small and passing thing. There was light and high beauty forever beyond his reach. And to me, that is the Tim Keller quote. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. This present darkness, this present struggle, it's going to be okay.
Cool. Well, thank you, Jeff, so much for sharing your life with us today.
Pleasure, Jason. I hope it was helpful to someone.
Yeah. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and this has been an episode of the Share Life podcast. We'll see you on the next one.
Are you a small business owner? Have you hit a glass ceiling where year over year, you cannot rise above a certain revenue level? Check out Jason Scott Montoya's book, The Jump, to discover how to level up your leadership and pivot your entrepreneurial passion to the highest level.